What we're talking about today is, refining the in-house and agency mix, right? And, with more data and more transparency and more of a focus on first-party data, there are certain things that we can do very, very well in-house, and very efficiently, but it's also balancing that with leveraging new ideas from, agency partners, right? And, balancing your in-house capabilities versus your external capabilities. So we'll talk a little bit about efficiency. At MGM, we found a good balance with a hybrid model. So our media agency of record is McCann Media, for both creative and media. So I think we found a really good hybrid where they focus on very high funnel awareness initiatives. We work very closely together, and then our in-house team is very, very focused on performance, very specifically heads and beds, loyalty program acquisitions, promoting all of our dining and entertainment options. So that is the model that we've used at MGM, and we've definitely had some success. We have, throughout my career there, I've been there 15 years, so I've seen it to where we were all in-house, all outsourced, and, I think we found a happy medium with the hybrid model. And then, I will just let everyone introduce themselves real quick. I'll turn it over to Matt.
I'm the director of digital marketing at Mountain Ops, and that involves basically all the paid media that we put out, along with our affiliate channels, site optimization, a handful of other things. So we're a smaller company, so kind of get to put my hands in a lot of different things.
Ryan Hawley, Glanbia Performance Nutrition.
Yanni Barros, advocate for in-housing.
All right. Well, thank you, gentlemen. I guess we'll start out with Ryan. Even after having a, somewhat negative experience with your prior agency, you still brought in another one. What and why are the benefits, and what were the key items you looked for as you looked at that new partner?
For us, it's bandwidth. We're a rather small team, and I guess where we're located too, it's rather hard to find all the talent that you guys have in this room. So we found it a lot easier to just go out and outsource. We do have an internal team as well, but it's our creative department. But yes, for us, it was just a simple bandwidth issue, and the fact that we are growing so fast and we're constantly acquiring new brands, and typically when that happens, we shift team members from our current portfolios over to those brands to give them that Glanbia feel. So it's just easier to keep that agency in place.
No, thank you very much for that. Yeah, and I definitely find that, I think bandwidth is always a consideration, right? I mean, I think, as much as, we're really where I feel like we've hit our stride is we're very focused on performance and, doing performance in-house. But also, I mean, that bandwidth is a key consideration because you have to find the talent. What if one person leaves, right? I mean, it definitely, you can put yourselves in some predicaments where agencies, where the agency model, I think, has the benefit of they're basically, they're working with multiple clients. So, as times ebb and flow, you can learn a lot from what they're doing. So, yeah, I definitely think there's some distinct advantages, and bandwidth is always one of them. Yanni, so what is the tipping point for Ministry of Supply to explore an in-house solution for search? What reasons prompted you to bring it in?
Sort of touching on the cautionary tale, this agency did not believe in negative keywords, and that was a red flag at the very beginning. That did not align with a lot of the audits that were conducted on the search account. And other than that, scale was really limited for almost 2 years, and there wasn't a lot of optimization going on in the account, so it was time to move on, test something new, test a new structure, and we basically have implemented something that's the polar opposite of what was in place before.
And then Matt, maybe you can kind of, tag on to that and tell us what was the tipping point for Mountain Ops to explore bringing an in-house solution, and what were the reasons they brought you in?
Yeah, very similar reasoning behind it. But I've done this with a few companies before, and it kind of falls back to that. But also, just the speed of getting things through and moving quickly. With the campaigns and the accounts we're moving really quick, and we're changing a lot of things. We're running a bunch of different deals or promotions, or changing on the site, and it became really hard to constantly communicate that back and forth between the agency, and then to get them fully on board with what we're thinking. And so it was a big speed piece of it. It's just we want to move quick, and we just didn't feel like the agency could keep up with what we were doing at that point. So.
No, and I think speed is key, especially in our industry, and especially when you're driving e-commerce sales, right? I mean, it really is when you need to drive volume, whether that's selling e-commerce on your site, for your supplements, or for me putting heads in beds, right? I think where I've seen, and Vivian had kind of mentioned this, where some of the brands do very well is you really, if you do have an agency partner, they almost have to be an extension of your team, right? Whether they're on the same Slack channels or you're talking very frequently. I even know one company, they're not represented here, but their agency is literally right around the corner from their office. And, so I think, really having that type of, for it to be successful, you really have to be lock and step and almost as one team.
Yep. Yeah, I agree.
Yanni, we'll jump back to you. The definition of an agency is evolving. Many organizations are now bringing in specialty agencies on a case-by-case basis depending on their needs. Is this something you would consider for, let's say, a really new initiative or just something that's outside of you and your team's kind of areas of expertise?
For sure. I think for something like organic search, that would be important, and something like awareness, but there would have to be an alignment there with the programmatic portfolio in order for that to be contextually relevant, I feel.
And Ryan, maybe could you share your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, for us, we outsource to multiple agencies, specifically one, Amazon. We went after a Amazon specific where they specialize only in Amazon, so search, DSP, OTT, and they manage that whole portion of our portfolio for us, and they're fantastic at what they do.
Got it. No, thank you very much. And Matt, could you tell us what's the best piece of advice you can offer any organization looking to drop their agency and bring everything in-house?
Yeah, I think it comes down to a few things. Obviously, you've got to have a person who knows what they're doing. On top of that, you need to make sure that. I think one issue I've found with a few different companies is when you're bringing it in-house, you got to understand their process of the agency, how you've worked with that agency, and someone who can kind of step in, understand that, and smoothly transition that. And then as you look at it too, there's so many different agencies, usually have a few different people on the accounts, someone who's doing kind of the voice of the agency, someone who's doing some of the reporting, someone who's making those changes. And so are you able to bring someone in-house that can kind of fulfill all those pieces of it, and then build out some of those reports internally where the agencies tend to have some of the software and some of those tools in place already. So you've got to kind of think through that whole process and then kind of back into it and do it over time. So it's usually taken, when we've done it before, it's a 3 to 6 month process, and it's working hand in hand with the agency to make sure it's a smooth one before it's in.
And that's always an interesting one because, as you said, I think you hit a couple key points there, at least for me, working hand in hand with the agency because I don't know if you guys have ever gone through a agency transition or essentially firing, right? They're usually not that happy to be losing the business, so, you're usually, that's usually a tricky slope, so, trying to ensure that, you do get that information. And then, I think having the resources internally is key, right? I think at MGM, or I can actually, I can share a specific, example. When I brought search in-house, when my boss asked me to kind of build out a team and take that over, thankfully we had a person in-house already who had previously worked on search, right? So you've got to have those capabilities because, as great as it sounds to say, hey, I'm going to take all this in-house, actually doing it, staffing up, getting in the engines, restructuring the accounts, if you're using a bidding technology, understanding the integrations, the portfolios, the optimization. So thankfully we had a person in-house who, was great, and, me and him, we worked together and we transitioned it and we, really built out the team. But yeah, if you don't have the right people, you're going to set yourself up for failure.
Yeah, and I'd say at the previous companies, I've had an analytics team who's helped a lot of those pieces. With Mountain Ops, we're smaller. It's basically me doing all the above, and so yeah, I think alignment with that agency was really important, and because there's times where I've reached out to them after, had questions, and there's times where maybe we'll reach out to them in the future and maybe work with them again. And so I think keeping a good, a strong a tie with them was good. And I've always had a good relationship with it's kind of gone away, at least in what I've seen.
Ryan, could you maybe tell us about, with your shift in models, and, could you tell us about what your media buying strategy looks like now, and what areas you're turning over to your agency, and what, if any, what are you doing with the agency, and what are you doing in-house? You mentioned the Amazon stuff before.
Yeah, well, going back a little bit, over the 3-year transition with our agency, the change in their strategy went from, search, display, programmatic, and by the end of our time with them, the only thing they wanted to do for us was social. So they were just focusing on social. It was clearly the easiest way to spend our money, and that's all they did. So when we brought on our new agency, we went back and we're like, we need, a full digital strategy from search to programmatic to social. And what we're having our new agency help us develop is, we spoke about this week, is our influencer strategy. Our category is very influencer, focused. And our brands really hadn't focused on that in the past. With the growth of the industry, and Optimum Nutrition being probably one of the pioneers in the industry, being 30 years old, it was very print focused. And the digital marketing change came really quickly for us. So that's why we went to our agency and we hired on the agency. And so, yeah, we have our new agency developing a full digital strategy. We have 2 teams, one for that and then one for our Amazon. Internally, we have our own creative department. And what we're doing now to make sure that the agency is getting the assets they want, they're more involved with our creative process, helping us develop those creative assets, whereas our previous agency would just take what we gave them and then come back to us, be like, oh, it wasn't right, you should have done this. And it was like, okay, well, now we want you to be more involved in the process. And you mentioned it just before, when we were looking for our new agency, communication was obviously something we really wanted. And so rather than finding an agency that was not located close to us, we found one that was in Chicago, close to us. So they're always in the office, especially during the transition period. So they come by all the time whenever we need them. Communication is key right now because we are going into our busiest time of the year, and we decided to transition into a new agency right before that. So, just having them very close throughout that process.
Yeah, I could definitely imagine that would be really easy. I feel like I live on conference calls, and it is just, it's just sometimes when you see them in person, and thankfully we bring our agency in very frequently, just you get so much more out of it, I think. So I think that's a great move on your part. Mm-hmm. Yanni, can you tell us a little bit about, with everything being done in-house means more work and more hats to wear, right? Mm-hmm. Which I think is great, right? It really enables you to grow and learn, but, how are you handling all of that? And, have you had to either restructure or add staff? And, maybe tell us about any challenges with that.
Right now, it's just myself and the VP of marketing who's lent a helping hand, but it's also a lot of late nights. And I feel like the majority of the work lies in implementation and in certain things like Facebook, which are almost self-sustainable, after they're implemented, are almost set it and forget it for a period of time, depending on whether you change spend and spend fluctuates throughout the month or you have different KPIs that come along that vary throughout the month. But otherwise, it's definitely not going to be sustainable as we scale, so we'll probably have to add assistance as we move forward with scaling search, especially, which you have to keep a close eye on.
Yeah, you definitely have to keep a close eye on search. I always got into the habit of watching it like a hawk because, Google's great, but, we can definitely, I think it's important, right? It's what we're entrusted to do. We're driving volume, we're spending dollars, so, no, I think that's great, and I think, the best of luck to you as you move to grow.
Thank you.
Well, I just wanted to be able to let everyone open it up to any questions that we may have outside here.
Hi, great discussion. I think this is a great conversation because I think most companies go through this battle trying to figure out, do we bring it in-house, do we bring in an agency? But Ryan, feel your pain points from what you were talking about before, transitioning agencies. As Cisco has gone through that period, and Just a couple of questions for you. From a strategic perspective, do you guys own the strategy? Does the agency, or is it kind of a joint partnership? And after going through what you went through with your cautionary tale, do you have different like guardrails that you put in with this agency, such as doing like, periodic checkups every 6 months to a year to make sure that all the objectives are being placed, are being followed at that time?
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously with what we had gone through, I guess in the past, data wasn't relatively given to us. So we made it a point when we found our new agency that, we set those guardrails from the beginning, making sure that, they're an extension of us. The way we look at them now is like you're one of us now, and your data is our data. So we made sure that we are able to track that. We found a few tools that, we're having them use on our behalf, so that way we have access to visually seeing the data. And when it comes to creating the strategy, it's joint. It's between the two of us. We've sat down. Obviously, we know who our consumer is. We've made, our consumer profiles with them. And from there, we've developed the strategy together rather than solely just, hey, we should only be doing social. Like, that's just not, So, yeah, we're definitely more involved now than we were before. So, yeah, keep it, make sure that, like, for us, it was just making sure they were always available. In person is preferred, having them there, which, like I said, they've been great with that. They're centrally located, very close to us. When we have calls, everyone's on the call. It's not just they're picking who should be there or not. It's, as a team, communication is key. We didn't have that before, and making sure that we were, communication is everything right now. So, especially transitioning at this time of the year is not the greatest. But, yeah.
Anyone else?
Hi guys, Christina Smith, Keen Footwear. I definitely echo Diane's commentary that this has actually been a really interesting panel to listen to, because it feels like this is practically a monthly conversation we have at Keen, which is always coincidentally about the time we get our monthly bill from our current agency. None of you mentioned geography, i.e. where you're physically located as a pro or a con or a barrier or whatever you want to call it to in-house versus out of house, sorry. And would just love to know if that is something that does or has impacted your decisions over time, or is a factor you think about going forward as to whether or not that's going to be something to think about. Portland, Oregon, surprisingly enough, is not a digital mecca, believe it or not. And so, as much as I would love to bring our media activity in-house, I know I'm not going to be able to find the people to do it. So it's a barrier for me.
Yeah, maybe I'll kick that one off. Geography is definitely a huge consideration, right? I mean, I think it's finding the right people and the right talent. And I think that's one of the reasons where the hybrid model does work well for us, because we are able to lean into our agency partner for their expertise on the high branding initiatives, right? And we really focus on the performance. And we've done a great job of training people in-house. We kind of we joke that almost everyone in Las Vegas has worked at MGM at some point who works in digital media. So we're very focused on training. I think on the performance side, I started in performance at MGM in 2009. I literally came from development on a construction site. So I was walking on a construction site, checking rooms, making sure they were right. And, they trained me. And I found that performance is a very trainable area. So I think it really depends on what you want to do, right? Analytics, performance. I think some of the areas where, some areas are less trainable than others, but we just have a really rigorous training program. We try to build and grow and develop people. We always have kind of a next person up strategy where, okay, if somebody moves on, we have kind of somebody else who's been in that area. So I think it definitely is a challenge, but I think if you can address it through the right people and process, it's definitely something that can be overcome. And also it's just about, when you talk with people from other markets, it's about selling your market, right? Like I tell people, hey, Vegas is a very affordable place to live. You've got all the entertainment you can do, so you just got to kind of sell it when you do have to bring those people in.
Matt, actually, I just wanted, because I know this was something, you do everything, we talked about this, and then next year you're hoping to bring in people, but you live in this area, and again, probably similar, it's not necessarily a mecca for people who are working in this industry. What is your take? What do you think you're going to be doing?
Yeah, I think so I'm wearing a bunch of hats right now, so as we're looking at it, I'm looking at potentially restructuring the team and training someone in-house to help with it, or finding someone who's just looking to get into the field and do some training on that, which I know it takes some time and there's, it's a slower process, but it's also nice to get someone in-house that you can kind of train and teach the correct ways to do things. So that's kind of what we're looking at right now. We'll see what happens then.
Ryan, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I was gonna say, we definitely see, you know, it as a pain point for us. You know, you would think that being in Chicago, well, not in Chicago, in Downers Grove, which is just outside of Chicago, would be you know, something that we'd be able to use as to our benefit, but it's actually worked for us in the reverse. A lot of digital agencies are in Chicago, downtown, which is a more desirable place to work, and trying to convince people to sit in that traffic for 2 hours to drive to the suburbs and come to our office is a little difficult at times. So for us, it is a little bit of a challenge being right there, but it's definitely something that hinders us and why we have gone to the agency quickly, because for us to build out the team, to do everything we want to do, finding that talent is more difficult than you would think.
And Yanni, you're in Boston, so I know that's not the challenge, just you don't want them. So, well, you actually do want them in-house, so
Yeah.
are you thinking, because you said yourself you're doing it on your own, are you like Matt, maybe thinking next year that you're going to start bringing people in?
Yeah, but I don't think it's been a pain point. I think in Boston, there are a ton of transplants, and there's a lot of talent, a lot of interest in digital, big agency community, so it won't be a pain point. I wish I'd be able to provide some advice, but that's something interesting to think about.
This question, I guess, could go to everyone here, but particularly for Giannis and Ministry of Supply. Have you seen when, like, just the volume of competitors that have come in trying to mimic and emulate the type of messaging that you have, even if they don't have a product to kind of back it up? Is that something that you're able to stay on top of in-house, or are your agencies always watching out for the next up-and-comers? How do you kind of defend your space in that sense?
That's a great question. I think that's a focus for basically after the allocations are cleaned up. I think there's a lot of overlap between channels and retargeting and whatnot right now, and that's definitely a great question. I think for now what we can do is use those brands as in-market segments across whatever digital platforms we use, just to make sure we hit the customers that they are also hitting to. And other than that, search has definitely been very saturated, and it's tough to gauge where you stand now that impression share is the metric of choice versus, not metric of choice, the metric we're forced to use versus average position. But I don't really have a succinct answer to that. We're definitely keeping a close eye on those in the space, and I get their ads all the time, and it's frustrating because it's basically mimicry at that point. But yeah.
Anyone else? All right, we'll give everyone a hand. You guys were great. Obviously, something people all need to find out more about.